Hi, I am currently speaking from outside of my Airbnb in Barcelona, and I was sitting on the balcony recording, but there were loud Frenchmen underneath me and I couldn't speak. And it's 4 a.m. Recently, anytime I'm triggered and something happens, I fall off balance, and I feel like my self esteem periodically drops a bit, which is normal. It's like you take a blow or a hit and you're gonna have a scar or a weak spot after. I think that's why it's so important to have your self esteem in check, which I think is hard for a lot of us for so many reasons, even just including our environment and social media, the internet, all the things. In life, it's normal for your self esteem and your sense of self to waver, but ultimately, the firmer and more solid you are in your self esteem, life is just a lot easier. It doesn't mean that the circumstances are easier, but the ways that you approach circumstances. In my head, it's so simple, but obviously in reality, it's so much more complex. It feels like it can just completely shake me off balance. There's definitely a lot of areas in my life that, like, things that used to shake me off balance are not even a big deal anymore. I can laugh it off, just not being so serious about everything. In general, believing that there's more good out there for me than bad. But basically what urged me to come outside and make this, for context, I have not recorded a podcast or any kind of, I don't like saying podcast, honestly. I like saying audio diaries, but I haven't in months, and I haven't felt called to record myself and post. I just wouldn't force it. I was lying in bed after this nice night, and I was thinking about my recent vulnerabilities or kind of beliefs about myself that I've seen mirrored back to me. And at this point, I don't know how much I should go into my esoteric knowledge and beliefs, because I feel like that's not the point. I feel like it's not that crazy to say that your reality is a mirror, even in the most simple ways. Even if you make it so simple, the way that you think impacts the way that you interact with others. It's like a boomerang effect where it all comes back around to what you think and feel about yourself. And that's what makes self-esteem. Realities, what self-esteem comes down to in my mind is the self-assurance, like authenticity, meaning that your beliefs about yourself align with who you are and how you act. And the crazy thing is, usually they do, or poor things about yourself, then you probably reaffirm that and look for validation for that. And that's probably how actions line up in your life. The same is true for good, but a lot of people find it hard to think highly of themselves. But yeah, I was just lying in bed and I was like, wait, when did I start feeling this way? A scenario happened. I tried to imagine the timeline at which I started to really hone in to see this behavior around me and think these thoughts, but I remembered it was near the time of a specific situation in which someone said something to me that was kind of a response or feedback on my personality. I feel like I took that and it implanted a seed in my subconscious that I wasn't totally aware of until I started building a story on top of it. And now I'm here in the present moment, like a month later, and I'm like, oh my God, I fully have entertained this belief about myself, and I'm literally seeing it enact around me. And I'm traveling right now, and that's a great way to see it. But I also have been really attuned to how I'm responding to people, how I'm feeling about being in a space with people, and then perceiving me and me interacting, but then also going through the daily motions of life, which usually you're not with people 24/7. it's been a beautiful time. But yeah, I almost feel frustrated because it's just in moments when a belief becomes really strong, it can take over in like seconds and change your experience. Because I would be having a good time and then this thought would pop into my head, and I started to like observe that in my surroundings, like how I was interacting with people. I know I sound really vague right now because I'm trying to not just like spill the entire tea on me, I guess. Because I love being vulnerable. Also, I think some things are important to just keep to yourself until you can fully reflect back on them. But yeah, I just feel like I had moments where that really strong negative belief took over that I wasn't conscious of. And that's why it's so important to be present. As I was thinking all of this, I'm trying to come full circle, I was laying on my back and I was listening to, I don't know his name off the bat though, but he literally looks like a wizard and he gives these lectures about consciousness and the ego and kind of life. But he has really amazing things to say, and sometimes I find that when I'm deep in thought but also trying to consume something, my thoughts will take over. You know, when you're listening to a podcast and your mind trails off, or when you're reading and your mind trails off, it's like that. I was thinking about this whole thing, like, this is something I want to speak about, but this is also something I'm realizing how important it is to be present and fact check. I feel like if you're a person like myself who can have these periods of low self-esteem and you feel like your self-worth and your identity is kind of shaken by that, then you need to go into situations and be present, be there, enjoy the experience, but be present, because if you're present, you're taking in everything that's happening around you in that moment. But if you're in your mind, you're locked into another reality. When you're going into a social situation or any situation and you're in your mind, you're like locked into that, and it's able to give you these little prompts, these intrusive thoughts that can be good or bad, and you create a story around that because you have access to these, almost like putting on a lens. When you're in your head, your mind gives you a way to see things, but when you're present, you're taking things as they are. But I feel like if you're someone with low self-esteem, it's important to go into social situations, and if something happens or if you're triggered, fact check in these situations and create a firm list of beliefs or ideas. Or you just can focus on one, honestly, if you're noticing, like in a social situation, like, hey, in social situations recently, I'm feeling like I'm not being heard or left out or something. Just be present in those moments and assess if that's something you believe about you, if that's something you want to believe about you, because you and only you get to decide what you believe about yourself, and that projects out into the world and how you interact with people. I was laying there and I was zoned out thinking about the whole thing I just said. Then I had this moment of like something was telling me, listen, like tap back into the present. And the podcast, the guy was speaking and saying the exact same thing that I was talking about, which is like his variation of saying fact checking and asking yourself about the beliefs you have of yourself and what you're noticing around you. I felt like in that moment I was talking to my higher self, or just those little moments where you're affirmed by the universe. That's like your own little conversation. I appreciate that, because that's also when I'm like, okay, I know that I am tapped in. It's not a how-to. There are people who speak about it in a more literal, like, how do you do this? I think it's different for everyone. But as someone who's very feelings-based and feels a lot, sometimes it's very hard when I'm so in a feeling and in my head. It's actually rare that we are feeling something very strongly, but not thinking thoughts. It's just the feeling, you know what I mean? I find that when I cry, Sometimes something will come over me, or I'll think something and I'll cry. But sometimes it's just a very deep cry where I feel that intense sadness or pain. When I'm angry, that's usually heavily associated with thoughts. I'm going back and forth between feeling angry and thinking more thoughts to make me feel more angry and feel the anger. Those are just examples. I think you're usually feeling and thinking a lot at the same time. How do you label that as a belief about yourself? Because it feels so all. Sometimes I think I'm very clear on what the belief is, and I think I have to give myself more credit for that because I know I have a lot of self-awareness. That's something I know about myself and I can always trust. But I don't react well to things, even though I have self-awareness. I don't react well all the time, but I think that's a result of feeling feelings and not really being present enough, being stuck in the loop of having such a strong feeling that fuels a very negative story. And that's just a lot of self-damage, and I feel like I've definitely engaged in that. I feel like we all have, but it can be very exhausting, I think. And it also can be a little bit exhausting to be present all the time. But I'm hoping that on my journey of doing that, I can just try my best to be present. Yeah. I think that's all I have to say for now. I didn't want this to be too long. Thank you for listening.